Okay, welcome to lesson 0.2, where we're going to talk about the anatomy of a Java program. So first and foremost, you might ask the question, well, what is a program? What does that mean when we talk about writing programs or programming a computer? When you write a program, you're basically just coming up with a sequence of instructions for the computer to perform. So, they're going to run some number of instructions in a particular order, and we'll look at some examples of that a little bit later. When you're writing programs, you really have to take some time thinking about how you can break a problem down into steps. Because a computer can't do a lot of the things that humans can, which is, say, like, if I were to tell you to go to the store and buy some milk, I don't have to tell you all of the intermediate steps that are involved in actually going to the store and buying milk, such as getting out of your, grabbing your car keys, going to your car, turning the car on, putting the car in reverse, like all of these little intermediate steps, sometimes have to be explicitly told to a computer in order to actually perform that task. Humans are a lot better at kind of generalizing and figuring out what are those little small steps in between that I need to perform. So when we talk about how to accomplish something, we're going to say you're going to create an algorithm. Which is a step-by-step description. So that's, all of the little intermediate steps that it takes to actually accomplish that task. Programs might use multiple algorithms to accomplish its job. A program is going to have some function, it's going to do something, and along the way you might have it employ several algorithms. And it's good to try to break the program down into these algorithmic chunks. We'll talk more about how you can do that. So when you're designing a program, computer science are going to create and employ algorithms, utilize algorithms in their programs. So if you do a Google search of algorithms, you're going to find tons and tons of references to computer science. So. But we all use algorithms in our day-to-day lives. We just don't ever think of it in that way. Okay, so now let's go. That's kind of a general computer science topics. Let's look at the specifics of Java and in terms of what a Java program looks like. So this was the Hello World program that we wrote earlier. This was in lesson 0.1. Public class Hello World, open squiggly brace or open curly brace, public static void main, parentheses, string bracket args, close parentheses, and then another open curly brace, and then system.out.println, parentheses, some text in quotation marks, and then a semicolon at the end, and close parentheses for the main and close parentheses for the class. Now, one thing I just want to note a little bit here is that this close parentheses here is closing this open parentheses, or curly brace. This closed curly brace here is closing this open curly brace, and this closed curly brace here is closing this open curly brace up here at the top. I'll sometimes refer to this as an open curly brace. Usually that's how I'll describe it, different from a closed curly brace, which faces the other direction. This could also be referred to as a left curly brace, and this one as a right curly brace down here. So either of those terms might be used. Okay, so let's try to break this down line by line and talk about what each of these lines does. They'll perform some function. Though when you remembered seeing the output, you didn't see any reference to the class, you didn't see any reference to main. Really all you saw was this Hello Franklin APCSA line, or I think it was Hello World was what we did for our first program. So that's the only thing that we saw the program actually create the output of the program was this, even though we had all these other lines of code in it. So let's try to break down each of those lines. So the first line, public class, hello world. So a class, we'll put the word public aside for now. Just kind of write it in there. Later on, when we learn about public versus private, it will make more sense what public means. But the word class we can get at right away. The class is a unit of code that's the basic building block of a Java program. So basically, all programs are going to be encased in these classes. So it's going to wrap around all programs that you want to write. Another important feature, here's one more thing. The line above is, this is called the class header. So it's like the first line in a program generally is going to be a class header. There will be maybe some lines above it. We'll talk about those when we learn about scanner later. So one thing to note, this is kind of important, when you write your programs in IntelliJ, it automatically does this for you, but it's if you ever make a mistake and change this line at the top, you'll notice that it doesn't like it anymore. The name of this class, which is Hello World, so Hello World up here, and the name of the file, the .java file, have to match up and be the same capitalization. So it's case sensitive. If you have a lowercase letter or an uppercase letter, those are going to be different. So the convention is to what's called camel case, and I gave you an example of camel casing here. It's where you capitalize the first letter of the first word, and then all subsequent letters of that word are lowercase. Capitalize the first letter of the next word, all subsequent letters of that word are lowercase, and so forth. So if you had like 4 words in this, you would have uppercase, lower, 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 uppercase, lower, 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 uppercase, lower, 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 uppercase, lower. So the first word, it's a lot easier to read this than if I were to write it all out in the same case of lowercase letters or something. You can see it's camel case, and this one is hello world. Okay, so that's our convention. It doesn't break if we type it in a different way. As long as the Java file and this class name are the same, then it's still going to run. But it's good to follow the conventions. They're there for a reason. And if you ever go work at a company, they're going to expect you to follow those conventions. So, alrighty. So let's look at the next line. Public static void main, string bracket bracket, left bracket, right bracket, args, close parentheses, and then an open squiggly brace. This is called a method. Now it doesn't say method anywhere here. This is just the word used to describe this kind of this chunk of code. And it's a public static void method. And then the other key thing here is that this method is named main. So methods, they're units of code that represent a particular action or computation. In this case, this is the main method, and that all programs need a main, which is kind of your starting point, your jumping off point for the program. This is where the computer is going to look first when you run your code. It's going to go to the main method, wherever that is, and then it's going to start running the code line by line from there. But you can name your methods other methods, or you can name your methods other names than main, and generally you can't use main again. And it's a bad idea to reuse main. Main is a special method name, but that's our method name right here. It's called main. Okay. So methods are used to break down complex problems into simpler units and allow programmers to reuse code. So this is what I was talking about earlier about algorithms. Like when you're writing a program, you might write several algorithms to solve some problems. And those algorithms, it makes the most sense to break them down into methods. And maybe you might need to break one algorithm down into several methods. So for my driving to the grocery store to get milk example, maybe you have a method that just tells you how do you drive the car, right? How do you get into a car and drive it? And then there's another method that handles the grocery store interaction. Like, how do you go into a grocery store and purchase an item, right? You know, how do you go and, like, what are the things that you need, and what items are you going to get, et cetera, et cetera. So those are examples of complex chunks that want to get broken down into simpler steps. Okay. And the upshot too is you get to reuse code. So you know, if we wrote a program to drive to go get milk, you know, we have a method that allows us to drive a car, and that, you know, that could be arbitrary. It could drive a car anywhere. And so we could then reuse that drive a car method that we wrote in another program that was like, you know, get to school. And so we could take that drive a car method that we used in the grocery store milk buying scenario, and then re-employ it. So we're reusing that same code to get to school. We're going to do drive a car, and then, you know, you arrive at school, so forth. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit of sense. Those are, you know, everyday examples of how you could think about programming. So again, about this line here, we've got all executable classes, so classes that can be run, are going to have this special method called main. And all the main headers look like this, which is up here at the top. Public static void main. For now, again, this keyword static, we're just going to write it. We don't know what it means yet. Public, again, we're going to write that. We don't know what it means yet. Void, similarly. Void void just means that this method doesn't give any information back. It just is going to run, and some methods might give some information back, and we'll talk about how you can do that later when we get to parameters and returns. And then this is the name main here. This thing right here, this is called a parameter. For now, all main methods require this string bracket args parameter. And again, kind of ignore this, just write it out. String is capitalized, that's kind of important. And later on, we'll talk about what does this actually mean. So a lot of things you gotta kind of just take on faith right now and write it out so we can get some basic programming going, and then we'll revisit them later, and hopefully will make a little bit more sense down the road. Okay, let's go ahead and pause the video here, and I'll pick up in the next one.